Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am, as always, very happy to be with you. Happy to be sharing another author interview with you and spending a little bit of, well, my Tuesday, might not be your Tuesday, depending on when you listen to this, but spending a little bit of my Tuesday with you as we talk about books and authors, etc. Hope that you had a great weekend, that your past week has gone well. I mentioned it during the last episode that I was picking my husband up from the airport. Everything went well. We picked him up. Our friends from California and Texas got in the same day. So for a while we had friends from Germany, friends from Canada, friends from the UK, friends from California, and friends from Texas here. Actually, they're almost all still here. The friends from Germany left on Saturday. The friends from Canada left today. UK friends leave Thursday, and the American friends are all still here till next week. So it's been busy, but lots of fun, and it's been great to catch up with everybody, especially the American friends who we haven't seen in almost 2 years. It's been almost 2 years, a few months short of 2 years since we have seen them and spent time with them. So that has been really, really good. And hubby especially has been loving that, to get to spend time with those friends. And it's one of his friends of 30 years, and then his fiance, and then his his sister and brother-in-law. I had not met the sister and brother-in-law before, although my husband has known the sister-in-law forever. Did I say yes, sister? I cannot talk today. That bodes well for a good interview. Sister. Husband has known the sister. Doesn't know her husband as well, but we've gotten to know them during their time here. It's been great. I'm going to maybe try to stop talking and just talk about a book instead, because I apparently cannot speak English anymore. At any rate, we're switching our attention to women's fiction, romance with some magical realism, and it is a Christmas story. So if you are getting in the mood to start listening to your Christmas books or reading your Christmas books, this time of year, I always start stockpiling my Christmas audiobooks to prepare for when I start listening to them in November. I say I wait till after Thanksgiving, but I kind of don't when it comes to Christmas books, because there's so many you want to listen to, right? And it takes a while to get through them. So I do start early. I try to hold off on movie watching and decorating till after Thanksgiving, but I'll sneak in the audiobooks. But this time I got to read a whole Christmas book in October. It was fabulous. The book is called Through the Snow Globe. Let me give you the description of the story. Diana Merriman, a physical therapist, is probably the only person in the small town of Snow Haven, North Carolina, who isn't looking forward to Christmas. It's been 3 weeks since her fiancé, Linus, was critically injured when a car hit him as he biked home from the toy store he owns and manages. Watching him open his eyes is the only gift she wants, but she can't help losing a little more hope every day. But an unexpected gift from a friendly neighbor and finding a snow globe of Snow Haven, a gift Linus had hidden in the closet the night before Christmas Eve, changes things in ways Diana never would have imagined. Because on Christmas Eve, Diana wakes up to find that it's not Christmas Eve, that is. Instead, it's somehow December 4th all over again, the day Linus got hurt. And as mystified as Diana is, she immediately starts a plan to save her partner from his fate. Nothing is that simple, of course. Instead of a single repeat of the day, Diana finds herself in an endless loop of December 4th, experiencing every possible variation of events. Along the way, she uncovers startling truths about herself, her relationship, and even her career that illustrate the ways she's retreated from her life. And in the face of life's slights and outright blows, from her deepest feelings. Suddenly hope is second only to joy as Diana opens her heart to the people she loves in every way she can. And again, that is Through the Snow Globe. It is, it's part all the best parts of a Hallmark Christmas movie, part Groundhog Day or, Groundhog Day episodes. Did you know in sci-fi episodes when you have loops, they call them Groundhog Day episodes now? You probably did. I'm probably not telling you anything you didn't know, but like I said, the best parts of a Hallmark Christmas movie, the warmth and the wonderful feeling that you get, but also the repetition of a day on a loop, like Groundhog's Day. And the one description says also touches of It's a Wonderful Life. A little bit of that as well, at least in terms of the magical realism. She doesn't see the world without herself like in It's a Wonderful Life, but she does learn a lot about herself. I really loved this story. I binged it. I wanted to read it before my hubby got home last week on Tuesday, and I did. I stayed up way too late one night finishing it before I knew I had to go pick him up at the airport, and then we'd have friends in town, and I really wanted to finish it. So stayed up way too late and finished it, which frankly is a pretty good recommendation for a book if it keeps you up much too late, right? So that is the description of the book. Let's go ahead and turn to the interview with Annie so she can tell you more about the story and how it came to be. Again, the book is called Through the Snow Globe by Annie Rains. Hi, Annie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm very excited to have you. We're going to talk about your book, Through the Snow Globe. But before we do that, if you wouldn't mind starting us off by just sharing a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you a bit.
Yeah. So my name's Annie Rains. I have been writing for a good while now. I think my first book was published in 2014, I think. I mostly have written contemporary romance with a small town kind of vibe to it. But most recently, I think last year was my first young adult fiction came out. And Through the Snow Globe is actually my first women's fiction novel with a little bit of a magical element to it. So I write romance and a little bit of young adult and now women's fiction. So I kind of got my hand in a couple of pots. But for the most part, they're all small town and they all have kind of a sweet, heartfelt vibe to them.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, it's October, and so I always think about, I read a lot of cozy mysteries and things during October. I'm not like a horror person, but I do like kind of paranormal. But my brain is always sort of jumping ahead to like, ooh, when can I start watching Hallmark Christmas movies and listening to Christmas audiobooks? And so you let me cheat a little bit this year. I got to read a book set at Christmas time in October. So thank you.
Yay. Well, I'm glad you read it. Thank you.
I did. As I said earlier, it's called Through the Snow Globe. Can you give an overview of the story?
Yeah, so it's my first women's fiction novel. It has that magical element. My story is about Diana. She's kind of a closed off young woman. She's engaged to Linus. And, through the first couple of, for the first chapter, they're engaged to be married and they're kind of, having a little issue trying to plan the wedding. And then Linus gets in an accident. He likes to ride his bicycle and he gets hit by a delivery truck and he goes into a coma. So my book is what you would call a time loop where she's given a magical snow globe and she shakes it and she gets to spend one more day with someone she's loved and lost. And she chooses to spend that day with Linus, her fiance, except he's in a coma and the day that she keeps repeating is the day of his accident. So she finds herself trying to change the events and trying to save him through the course of the book. And so that's the main plot. And through the course of, repeating that day, she kind of like changes herself and she sees sides of herself that she perhaps needs to change and come to terms with. And it's kind of her growth. Like she has a character growth through the process of renewing that day, trying to save her fiance.
Okay, so you have an introduction to the story itself, to Linus and Diana and some of the characters. So we are going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, Annie will be talking about the inspiration for the story itself. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Annie Rains. We are talking about her holiday novel, Through the Snow Globe. Let's go ahead and return to that interview.
Yeah, and you said this was your first foray into women's fiction of this nature. So what was your initial inspiration for the story?
Well, I love women's fiction, and I have always loved that magical element, like the teeny tiniest, and not necessarily like I love like full blown magic, but I love stories that have just that tiniest little magical thread. And when I was growing up, I used to collect snow globes. So I've always had a heart for snow globes. I think they're so like romantic and magical in a way. So kind of my inspiration came from a mixture of all of those things. Like I've always loved time loop stories, and I've always loved snow globes, and it just all came together. And I've always had that, I've loved the idea of the question, what if you got one more day with someone that you've lost? So I think the main story stemmed from that question that I've always kind of loved in the back of my head.
And
if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Some of my favorite, like the sci-fi TV series that I watch, some of my favorite episodes tend to have that kind of like Groundhog Day, repeating days, time loop feel to them. How was it writing, making each day a little bit different, keeping track of all of those elements? Did you have a system for that?
You know, I kind of went into the process very naively. Like, I don't think I had any idea, because obviously I've never written a time loop before. I had no idea how hard it would be. I think I was kind of naive about it, because once you've written the first day, like, okay, you have the first day, but then you have to repeat it, and it can't be boring, and she has to make growth. So I found it really challenging, especially as the days went on, and I wanted her to have like a clear character arc and growth. So it was fun, but also challenging. So I did have to do some research on time loops, just to make sure I was doing the trope justice, because I wanted to do it right. And I really don't think I even knew there was a right or wrong way until I started writing it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is harder than I thought it would be. So it was a big challenge, but I actually really enjoyed it.
In some ways, going into those things naive is probably a blessing, right? Because you didn't know what was ahead of you.
Right. And I don't think I would have chosen it had I realized like, oh, this is hard. And like, you know, readers are going to eat you up if you don't do it correctly. Kind of like, I just thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to write a time loop? And then I was like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking?
Exactly.
Yeah, it was hard. Like I rewrote lots and lots of the days in the time loop, because I wanted to make sure that she had like, it was interesting and things were changing, and she had, you know, like, you know, kind of like what's happening, what's going on, and then figuring out what she's trying to do. And then as it fails, getting frustrated and kind of just banging her head, like, what am I supposed to do? Mm-hmm. It was fun though. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
And then keeping track of, for instance, one day she sends her friend flowers for her birthday, and that makes a change in her friend's life. And the next day she forgets. And so kind of keeping track of those details must have been interesting as the author.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you're rewriting days and then like totally deleting those days and kind of like, this is not going to work. And then trying to figure out what you have and what you don't have. And like all the characters were having their own little arcs also, like her patient, her young adult patient and her older patient. And like everyone was kind of changing along with the choices that she made. So it was challenging to keep up with what's going on.
I would imagine, yes. Can we talk a little bit more about Diana as the main character, and it is told from her point of view? What about her is going to resonate with readers?
Well, I've already read a few of the reviews. For the most part, people love the story, and I've gotten lots of great reviews, but I've gotten a lot that I found interesting because I don't think I necessarily intended it this way, but a lot of readers have said in their reviews like, I did not like Diana at first, but I came to like her. I did not, enjoy Diana's character at first, but I think the author meant for it to be that way. And I got a lot of those, which I found very interesting, but those were good reviews because overall they said they enjoyed her story and her arc and how she changed, and they wound up liking her. But I think what resonated with me when I was writing her, that was how closed off she was and how guarded she was in the beginning because, she didn't want to get hurt and she didn't want to let people in. And I don't even think she realized how closed off she was. And she didn't understand why, how it was affecting her job and her relationship. And then, slowly through the process of the book, taking that guard down a little bit and letting people in and accepting people's help and, showing her feelings toward them and accepting, the things that they might be offering to her as far as, feelings and friendship and relationships. I feel like that's hopefully what readers will relate to in her. Like, we all feel a little closed off, I think, in some ways, sometimes in our life, or we want to put guards up because we've been hurt. So hopefully they'll relate to that and they'll really enjoy how she opens up through the process of the story.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I didn't ever dislike her character, but as a reader, you can, you see more than the character does, of course, and you have all of these insights. So you want to yell at the character, just do this. You know what you need to do, or
Right.
or not do. So I could understand where that might be frustrating for some people because you're a little more omnipotent as the reader.
Right.
But
and I think even in our own lives, a lot of times we might know what to do as well, but it's so hard when you have those guards up, when you have the walls up to actually do it. So even if there was like some omniscient person looking over our own lives, they could be screaming at us, just do it. Right. And once you're in that situation, it's harder than you might think. So I did relate to Diana.
Yeah. And I don't like to give a lot of spoilers for things, but I don't think this isn't giving anything of the end away, but because she is so closed off in the relationships that she's had, her relationship with her future mother-in-law is a little strained. She doesn't understand why her mother-in-law wants to hang out with her or try to have a relationship with her. And so she keeps like declining her calls. So I think for me, I was like, just answer the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it makes more sense when that person is human and reacts in a human way. Not everyone's going to get it right that on their second day through the time loop.
And Diana didn't really have a relationship with her own mom. So I think the whole like mom role is very like off-putting to her. She doesn't know what to do, even if it's just a mother-in-law. Like, I don't know, So yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. You mentioned that you did do some research on time loops and those types of stories. Were there other avenues of research that you did for the book?
The time loop was the big one because Diana is a physical therapist, and in my day job, I'm an occupational therapist. So I already knew a whole lot about rehabbing and, PT and OT and all that kind of stuff, home health, all of that stuff was kind of in my like brain already, and I didn't really have to research it at all, which is great. Because usually the occupation of my characters is like one of the big things that I have to research, because, you know, you got to make sure you get that right as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very grateful, because this time loop was such a challenge for me that I really needed to put all of my research and resources into that. So I'm really thankful that I chose an occupation that I already knew for this one. And Linus he owns a toy story, not a toy story, and toy store. So I did research that a little bit, but, not too much.
Right. Yeah. You didn't need to, because he isn't the main character. You don't have to have as much detail about everything that goes on behind the scenes of a toy store, right?
Right.
Now I want to research running a toy store in a small town and everything you need to know and what goes into that. But that's neither here nor there. It is time for our second break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about characters and character development. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today, as you know, with Annie Rains about her book, Through the Snow Globe. Let's go back to that conversation.
In terms of your character development, when you start writing a new story with new characters, do you tend to have a really good understanding of the characters before you start writing, or do you prefer to let them develop as you write? Is it a combination of those two things?
Well, I try to have as good of an understanding as I can. There's only so much. I feel like I always try to know what they physically look like, of course, and what their strengths and weaknesses are, what their goal in life is, like what's holding them back. All of the backstory I try to have. But even so, even having all of that, I feel like in the first draft, I find out so much about the character, like the really good stuff that there's no way you can even plot that ahead of time, because it has to come out through the process of the story. So a lot of the stuff about Diana I had no idea about until I was actually writing it and kind of getting in her character and understanding her motivations and what she's actually thinking a whole lot more.
You've not written magical realism before. Would you do another story that had elements of magical realism?
Yeah. Well, when I started writing, actually, I was doing a lot of the magical elements in my stories. And anybody who's edited, all the people that would possibly have taken the book, they always discouraged it and pulled it out. So I have actually written it in there before, and, it just didn't fit with what I was contracted to do or trying to sell. But yes, the Snow Globe is book 1 in a 3-book contract. And I've already written the other.
Question. Okay.
Huh?
I was going to ask that follow-up question. You beat me to it. Wonderful.
Yeah. So I've already written the other 2 books in the contract. I'm editing the last one right now, and they all have magical elements. So the next one that comes out, in this contract is kind of a Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants kind of story, except, with adult characters. And there's a charm bracelet that kind of has a magical element to it that's bringing the friends together. So yes, and that one's coming out in the spring of next year.
Okay, fun. Does that have a working title or an existing title?
Yeah, and well, it's already up for pre-order on Amazon, and I'm guessing it's up everywhere. It's called The Charmed Friends of Trovile. So it's got
Okay.
like, 3 friends on the cover. It's like a bright pink, lovely cover, and it's got a charm bracelet kind of circling around them. It's really pretty. I really loved the covers that the cover artist has done for these books.
Did you have the same cover artist for both the second one and the Through the Snow Globe?
I did. Yeah. And I'm
Wonderful.
very happy, like super happy with the covers. They're
Yeah.
so much fun.
Yes. And so are you currently working on the third one? Are you working on something else?
I'm editing the third one. So the third one doesn't come out until 2025, and it's about a time capsule. So, an old time capsule gets dug up, and kind of elements from that last summer together happens to the main characters. It's a really big challenge to write as well. These magical elements they're way more challenging to write than my usual small town contemporary fiction, but they're also very satisfying. So I'm editing that one, and I'm about to start my next book for Grand Central, which is, my small town contemporary romance books.
Okay. And do you want to talk a little bit about those, just like an overview, or any of your other writings?
Yeah, well, so this year for my small town contemporary romance, The Good Luck Cafe came out this spring. It was the final book. They're all standalone books, but it was the final book in my Somerset Lake series. And so I have a new series starting next year. The Finders Keepers Library comes out in April, I think. And it's there's 3 point of views, and it's a really nice, heartfelt story. I think all of my books really have that heartfelt theme to them, no matter what genre they're in. And it's about, I've always wanted to write a character that has a chronic illness. So my main character she's just found out that she has a chronic illness, and she's kind of going through the journey of accepting it and what she's going to do and how it's changing some things. But also she had a really horrible fiance that when he found out she had a chronic illness, he kind of said, no, thanks. So that's really kind of put her in a spiral, which I found interesting. So she's trying to navigate it for herself, but also dealing with being dumped almost, not at the altar. It was like a few months away from the wedding, but just going through her journey through that. And I found it very satisfying to write.
Yeah, different stages of grief for both a relationship and finding out that you have this chronic condition.
Yeah, but also then finding the perfect guy that, that she knew from her childhood, and they're kind of like rebuilding a garden together, and realizing that not everyone's going to shy away from what would be challenges. Her life is just a little bit different. It's not less, but it's different. And he doesn't shy away at all. And he really is the perfect guy for her.
Nice. What is it about writing romance, whether it's contemporary or maybe even elements of magical realism? What draws you to writing within that genre?
Well, I think the main thing I'm drawn to is hope. I think hope is one of my main themes in all of my fiction. I think romance especially has that, no matter, I love to have a character that has some kind of struggle. Of course, they all have struggles that they're going through, and kind of taking them through the struggle and finding the hope at the end of the process. I find that's like my main motivation, to see a character go from maybe no hope or a struggle or like at their wits' end and coming through it on the other side in a better way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? As you're saying that, I think that's my main reason for liking for reading books that I know are going to have a happily ever after. I mean, you know that not everyone lives happily ever after, but there's always that hope of it being happily ever after, right?
Yeah. And even if it's not a romance, like even if it's not the hope of a happily ever after for the couple, like a hope of, something better, like for the women's fiction, watching the woman go through her struggle, her journey, and coming out on the other side stronger for it. I find that really satisfying as a reader and as a writer.
Mm-hmm, sure.
I do love a good happily ever after, or a book that gives you hope that there could be a version of happily ever after. And you especially want that in a Christmas story, right? Or a holiday story. Definitely want to come away with a feel good, a good feeling when you finish a book like this. So love that. We are going to go ahead and take our last break of this episode. When we come back, we will be talking about Annie's path to writing for publication. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Annie Raines.
You mentioned that you've been writing for a while. So is writing something that you always wanted to do? Is it something that you came to later in life? How did that work for you in terms of deciding to write and write for publication?
Well, it's something that I've always wanted to do. I can remember being like 6 years old and fascinated by stories and wanting to be read to. And I would wake up early on Saturday morning, like before anybody else woke up, because there was this librarian that came on the TV and she would just read books. She was it's probably very boring, but I remember it being like, I must wake up for this librarian because she was going to read books. And then when I realized that there were people that wrote the books, I decided that was what I wanted to do. And ever since then, just writing stories all the time. That's what I did in my free time. And when I was, I think, fresh out of high school, I sat down and decided that, that's what I was going to do. I was going to write full-length books.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have some of the stories that you wrote in your younger years?
Oh my goodness. I'm sure I do. I'm positive that I do. I used to take it, and I still take it so seriously, but things were so different back then. I had a huge computer and I would type up my stories. And, at first I would get the books that I loved and I would count every word in a chapter to see what the chapter lengths were supposed to be. And I would, I just typed up my whole stories and then I would print them out and then I would bind them. And then I had the story in its own little book form. And, I'm sure I still have those. I have lots of them.
I love that. Probably saved on a floppy disk of some sort.
Yeah, I have those too, for sure. I don't know that I have a reader for those floppy disks. And I don't know that I want to go back and look at those. They're probably best unread.
Yeah, but the kind of the nostalgia of knowing that they're there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yes. From your experience then, do you have advice for someone who's thinking they do want to write?
Yeah. Well, I have so much advice. My main advice is to not give up, because I went through, from out of high school and I decided I was going to do this. And I went through very passionate writing my books for maybe 5 or 6 years. And then I did get discouraged and I did give up for about 5 years after that. I'm really glad that I finally did pick it back up and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. And I'm not going to stop until it happens. And it still took about 5 years after that for it to happen. But if I had given up, it never would have happened. So I always advise authors, don't give up, keep studying your craft, read other people in the craft, hire an editor if you have to, or get a critique partner. That's what I did. And we're still critique partners to this day. And we have read everything of each other's and we trade, anytime we're finished with a book. It's just helpful to have other people that you trust their feedback on your stories. Take the classes, just study the craft and keep going, never give up.
Mm-hmm.
That's my main advice. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. When you take the time to read for you, what are your favorite authors and some of your favorite or your go-to genres?
Well, I'm kind of a mixed bag. I love Catherine Center. She's like my new in the last couple of years. Love Catherine Center. I have always loved Karen Slaughter. She's, I guess she's considered a thriller, like major thriller writer. And I really do like those thrillers. I love thrillers. So Karen Slaughter is a go-to. She's very dark, which is interesting because my books are very lighthearted and heartfelt. But I do enjoy her. She gets my adrenaline pumping. I enjoy Rand Thane. She's a small town kind of sweet vibe, kind of like the books that I write for Grand Central. Those are a few that I love. Oh, I also love Christina Lauren books.
Okay. Love it. It's interesting that you do like the thrillers, but I often talk to people and sometimes they like to read almost the opposite of what they write because it kind of, puts their brain in a different place. So,
yeah.
So thrillers are your escape. Do you like, just kind of suspense thrillers, or do you like the really, really scary, maybe even gory thrillers?
Yeah, more suspenseful. I like gory. I don't mind gory, and I like dark. I just want that kind of must keep turning the page, can't stop feeling.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of internet, if people want to know more about you or your books, website and any social media that you're active on.
Yes, my website is www.annierains.com. And for all of my social media, I'm Annie Rains Books. So ANNIE RAINS Books. And that would be I'm mainly on TikTok. No, well, not too much TikTok, but I am trying. Instagram, mainly TikTok and Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you were hoping to highlight or cover during our time together?
I don't think so. My book's available now through the Snow Globe, and it's actually going to be part of the Once Upon a Book Club December box. So if readers did want to give it a try, they could purchase it with the Once Upon a Book Club book box, and they have this cute little, you get like a hardcover. It's not in hardcover anywhere else except through the book club, and they have a special cover for it. It's going to be hardcover, and there's little gifts that go along with each, like page 83, open this gift, and page 100, open this gift. So it's kind of like a reading experience. So if readers are interested in that, they can get it at Once Upon a Book blog or book club, Once Upon a Book Club.
That sounds really fun.
Yeah.
And of course, we are mid-October, so people can order it or, find it in preparation for reading it for the holiday season, which is perfect.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Well, Annie, I want to say thank you so much for taking time to talk to me, especially about Through the Snow Globe, but also about some of your other writings as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you once again to Annie for not only taking the time out of her schedule to talk to me about Through the Snow Globe and other writings and everything else that we discussed, but also for giving me an excuse and a justification for reading a Christmas book in October. Can you read a Christmas book in October? Of course you can. Do I just make self-imposed rules? For me personally, yes, I do. But hey, it's nice when somebody gives you a really good reason to break your own self-imposed rules, right? So thank you, Annie, for the book and the conversation and my very silly justification for reading this book in October. If you are a fan of romance, of women's fiction, of elements of magical realism, then you will definitely want to put this on your holiday reading list. And you may want to pre-order the second book and keep an eye out for that third book as well. Sounds like those are going to be a lot of fun. And maybe check out some of Annie's other writings. She has The Small Town Contemporary, which sounds a lot of fun. And, if you're just looking for books that have a lot of hope, then I think this would be a good author to look into. Or if you have somebody else, find yourself a Christmas book, find yourself a Christmas gift, even a holiday gift, depending on the readers in your life and what they like to read. This may be a good option for you or for them. So thank you to Annie. Thank you as always to you for joining me. Hope that you will join me for the next episode. We are switching gears, of course. We have nonfiction. We have a book of poetry it's written for young women. Doesn't only have to be for young women, of course, but it is about women. It's poetry about prominent Indian women. So you've got a little history, you've got a little biography, you've got poetry. The artwork is beautiful. So join me for that conversation next week. And I'm looking forward to speaking with the author and talking about the book and all of the inspiration and everything that went into the making of that book. So join me for that episode. As always, if you have not done so already, please like, subscribe, follow on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. That means you'll always get new episodes when they come out, especially when we have extra episodes. You'll know when those happen. Also, you can leave a review, which helps greatly to get the podcast out to more listeners. That can be a starred review. That can be a written review. It can be one sentence. It can be a paragraph. It can be in haiku form. Whatever you're feeling inspired to do, it is helpful, and I appreciate it greatly. Also, you can follow the podcast on social media: Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. If you're on any of those social media platforms, come find the podcast. I'm happy to hear what you're reading, what you want to read. Are you reading Christmas books in October? Please come tell me what you're reading and what's going on in your brain. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you're having a great week. We got some beautiful, beautiful rain here today, which really makes me want to curl up with a book and a cup of tea or coffee or hot chocolate or something and just read. I hope that you have plenty of time for that and that you can go just get yourself lost in a great book. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.